Playing games is, by some form or other, part of being human. We've been playing games for thousands of years. The game backgammon is 5,000 years old. And games come in many different varieties and shapes and styles: board games, dice games, card games, role-playing games. The list is endless. And we play games for various reasons: to pass time, to have fun, spend time with friends and family, to escape reality, maybe. But the most popular type of game over the last 10, 15, 20 years is the video game. The video game industry is one of the largest and fastest growing industries in the world, and in fact is the fastest growing form of media. And it's projected to earn over $80 billion in the next few years. But what makes them so compelling and so popular? Why are so many people spending so much time and a lot of money playing them? Well, for starters, video games are no longer the single objective, two-button, left-to-right scrolling games that they once used to be. Video games today are way more complex than that. Video games have open sandbox worlds that, instead of going left to right, you can explore the entire environment of that universe and interact with the people and places. Video games now have physics engines that emulate real-life physics in the video game world. Certain games now even have morality systems where the choices you make in those games and how you interact with individuals ultimately shape the outcome of what the game is going to be like and how characters in that game are going to respond to you. And one of my favorite things about modern video games is that they actually have really intriguing and interesting storylines that keep you captivated. Now, although all these things play into why video games are so engaging, they also make video games very difficult, and Tom touched up on this in his presentation. They could be very frustrating. If you're a gamer, you know about rage quitting. You want to throw your controller at the TV screen. It seems impossibly hard to pass this level, but we don't give up. We keep coming back. And I think the feature of video games, I mean, whether old or new, that keeps us coming back, and again, Tom touched on this, is video games offer some reward system, right? Whether it's psychological, social, emotional, that keep us coming back. And imagine being able to set up a classroom where, despite the challenges that students face, they keep coming back for more and will continue on until they get it. Now, before I get into kind of what we've done at the Academy and the 2 video games that we've developed courses around, I want to say that using video games in the classroom is by no means a new or novel idea. This is a game that I played in elementary school, maybe some of you are familiar with it, called Number Munchers. I love this game. Maybe it's why I enjoyed doing math, I don't know. But the point of the game was to move around the squares and munch and eat the numbers that met a specific criterion, in this cruel example, multiples of 19, and all while trying to avoid those purple monsters whose name I have forgotten. Okay, the Oregon Trail was another really good game, although when I played it, it didn't have any color. It was just black and white. And the whole point of this game was you were the leader of a group of settlers traveling from Missouri to Oregon on the Oregon Trail, and the game would present periodic challenges that settlers would face, and you had to kind of make your decision as to what to do, and that would affect the outcome of the game. You just always prayed that you didn't die of dysentery. And what makes this game particularly interesting to me is that instead of just being taught about the settlers of that era and reading about it in a book, you actually got to experience it, you got to live it, and I think that's such a fun and powerful way to learn. So what do we do here at the Academy? I'm just going to ad-lib a little here outside of what I had practiced. These 2 video games came very organically. The first one, called Sid Meiers Civilizations, which you're going to see, is, thank you. I think we saw hints of it before with the 2 gentlemen over there. We've run that one twice, and the other one, Kerbal Space Program, we're actually going to do for the first time this semester. But the first video game, Sid Meiers, came about after a TED Talk, TEDx conference about 2-3 years ago, and we were grabbing lunch after, and I said, Don, I would love it if I could design my own course with subjects that I think are interesting. And at the time, my idea was to do something about the history of science. I teach science. I find the history of science makers is kind of boring in textbooks, but having read so many books about science, like the backstories to these individuals is incredible. And he said, yeah, you can do that. And I was like, what? He's like, yeah, there's a course called IDC, through interdisciplinary studies, that allows you to do that. And I said, okay, do you mind if I put something together? He said, sure. I went home, thought it through, came back to school on Monday, very excited, looked at the class list for next year, and I came to a realization that about 80 to 90% of these kids are gamers. What if we did something with video games? And that's where the idea came from. So Sid Meiers is a turn-based 4X game, and the 4X stands for, it's a game where you explore, exploit, I'm forgetting one of them. Explore, exploit, help me out here. What was the other E? 4X. Exploit, expand, explore, and as the Daleks would say, exterminate. So essentially the game starts off by you choosing a certain map. That's going to set the geography of the world you're going to be trying to conquer with your civilization. And then you go on to choose from one of several famous leaders from civilizations. Now, what we do for our classes, the two courses we've linked this course to are history and geography. And the history course we chose was history up to the 16th century. So we mandate our students to pick only ancient civilizations and no modern leaders. And what we do is before they get to play a single game, they have to do an entire research project on that civilization. What geography did they occupy, what natural resources were on that land, what kind of military did they have, and so on. And what this does is it gives them a real sense of ownership and pride over the civilization that they've researched on and know all this information about. And that's the civilization that they have to choose and play with for the rest of the year in the class. And so the game starts off by giving you 2 player units, one which are a group of settlers that you're going to use to settle your civilization's first city, which will be your capital, and a group of scouts that are used to wander around the map and open it up for you so you can see what is available. And once you found your city, the micromanaging begins. If you're a bureaucrat, you would love this game. And we run the 4th version of the game. Currently, there are 5 versions. But once you found your city, you're given options. What would you like to build in your city? Your options are either other players in the game, so are you going to build a worker, so you can start harvesting food and money and resources off the land, so your civilization can expand? Or are you going to build a warrior to protect your civilization, or perhaps go and pillage another one? Or are you going to choose to create another settler to go and expand your civilization? And the other option is, what building would you like to build? And as you go through the game, the options become more and more. Would you like to build some barracks to make your military a little bit stronger? Or perhaps you want to build a school or a library? And all these have different effects in the game. And much like the presentation we saw earlier, the rest of the game, you go out, you explore, you meet other civilizations, you found new cities, you try to find more resources, and if you don't find resources, you're going to have to establish trade routes with some of these other civilizations. And so there are 4 ways that you can become victorious as a civilization. The first one is by domination, through pure military might. You build a big army, and the first civilization to go and capture the capital cities of all the other civilizations will win. The other way is through science. If your civilization becomes the first to establish and successfully complete the Apollo program by sending a rocket into space, wins through a science victory. The third type, diplomatic, arguably the hardest, is when your civilization can successfully create the UN and get all the other majority of the other civilizations to vote you as the leader of that. And what makes this hard is, depending on how you play the game, it's not always easy being friendly and being liked by all the other civilizations. And lastly, cultural victory occurs by the different types of buildings you build in your civilization begin to generate cultural points for you, and if your cultural points become high enough, your culture inadvertently starts to influence the other civilizations, whether they like it or not, and if you influence the majority of the other civilizations, you've got yourself a cultural victory. So how do we tie this to the curriculum? So what we've done is we've taken all the expectations that we find appropriate from the geography and the history courses, and we put them into this weekly journal. So we have the expectations actually on there, but then we put them in student-friendly format so they are questions they can understand. And as they play the game, from Monday to Thursday, they write in their journals trying to answer and come across, well, how do resources affect me as a civilization? How does the geography that I'm stuck with, where my civilization has been founded, affect what I am doing? And so you have this, over time, elaborate report that instead of the teacher telling you, this is how things are affected, this is how this occurs in a civilization, or reading about it in a textbook, you get to experience it firsthand and you're discovering it as you go along. And so once Friday comes, and I'm sure you guys are all wondering what this staff up here is for, I'm going to get to it in a second, the students sit down in what we've come to call the Council of Thrones. And essentially what happens is they sit down around a large table in the cafeteria, and they become their leaders, their civilization's leader. And they start talking about every week a certain aspect of the curriculum that they were having problems with, right? So maybe one person was having challenges with resources, and how did that affect their civilization? What were some of the things that they tried to do? Did they try to establish trade routes? And if they didn't, they get into conversations over there. And this has, in my opinion, two benefits. One, it gives students an opportunity to see, well, if there was a challenge that I didn't face, did somebody else face that challenge? And it gives them a good perspective. And the other tool that this brings is that it gives the teacher who's running the class an idea of, well, are there students that are struggling with any specific area of the expectations that we're trying to cover? And if so, they can deal with it. Now, the staff here comes from the fact that when we designed this course, we thought it was going to be amazing and wicked, but there's so many things that we didn't anticipate. Like people getting into such enthusiasm about their characters that we had one student, the first year we ran it last year, come one week with this staff that she designed at home because she thought it would be something powerful to hold on to as the leader of her civilization. Just a piece of wood, she tore apart a coat hanger from her parents and put a marble in the center. We have students coming up dressed in togas if they're playing as the Roman civilization. They come in capes. They really get into it. And I was talking to Mr. Vance over there about how the game doesn't stop in the classroom. They're talking about it in the hallways. They're scheming behind one another's back, making alliances. It's quite hilarious, the things that we didn't look into. So back to how you can kind of address issues that the students are having difficulty with comprehending or discovering. The game is highly, highly adaptable. The teacher has the ability to play around with the features of the game, change the geography, if it's a geography issue they're having, the climate of the area, the resources, the map type. It's quite intricate how specific and narrowed you can make the scenarios of the games to help students better understand what's going on. Kerbal Space Program, this is another one that happened very organically. Two of my grade 9 students last year said, "Oh, sir, have you ever heard of this game called Kerbal Space Program?" Because they know I'm huge into astronomy. I said, "No." You should check it out on YouTube. I said, "Okay." A few days later, I watched a video and my mind was blown. And so I was explaining, I came back and was telling a grade 11 student about the game, and he said, "Why don't you make that into a course like you did the Civ game?" I said, "Hold on." I ran to Don's office from the cafeteria and pitched a quick idea of what I thought we could do with it, and lo and behold, we're going to launch it starting next week. Essentially, Kerbal Space Program is a game where you are the space, advisor. You run the space program for this fictional planet called Kerbin to try to get them to reach their ultimate goal of becoming a spacefaring civilization. And the great thing about Kerbal is that, the planet Kerbin, is that it's a lot similar to Earth than you would think. Actually, it's exactly like Earth. It has the same acceleration due to gravity, 9.8 meters per second squared. And so the physics of how you get the rockets up there is exactly like they are here on Earth. And this is not just a game where you have, a bunch of pieces, you make a rocket, stick them together, and up and away you go. No. You'll notice that each component of a spaceship that you're going to build, whether it's the capsule or the fuel pods or the thrusters, has a set of information about them. Okay? And one of the most important ones of how we're going to apply this to the grade 12 physics course, the entire unit on motion and its applications, so where we talk about acceleration, velocity, and so forth, is that each component has a mass to it. So I can go ahead and build a very huge ship, but if I don't calculate and take into consideration the mass of each component and how it relates to the rocket ship, and I don't plan and correctly put the correct number of thrusters and the correct amount of fuel, and if I don't stage my rocket even in the correct order to get it to lift off, well, right? But once you play the game, you become good at it. You can actually build a rocket, send it to the launch pad, and up and away you go. And so there's a lot of information that we can utilize, but we're going to be taking velocity and acceleration and that whole unit in grade 12 physics that I talked about, and we're going to relate it all back to rocketry. So not only am I giving them the formulas and equations and they're going to write it, but someone else in the presentation earlier said, it's not just about the equations. You got to get the students to see through the equations, right? And see what is the real-life application of this. And the game gets into really crazy detail that I don't have enough time to talk about. Once you go up, you have to tilt your ship at the correct altitude or else you're doomed. But anyways, you become really good at the game, and eventually you can get your spaceship into orbit, which takes several hours of mastery to do. And then if you get even better, you can build ships to land them on the moons and other planets within Kerbin's solar system. So I think my point is that video games, although they come with certain stigmas, used correctly in the classroom, they are amazing and powerful ways of teaching students the curriculum that we're trying to give them. And it's not just us up there standing and telling them what to do. They're discovering it through game-based playing, right? Which I think is a common theme. You're doing, you're creating, you're doing it all by yourself. I mean, we talk about students not being able to pay attention in class, but they go home and can play video games for hours on end. So I think there's a lot that we can do. I'm not saying this is going to work for every course, for every subject, but I definitely think it has its place in education. Thank you.